The deep, resonant blare of the emergency alarm shattered the quiet hum of the Intergalactic Council's grand chamber. It was a sound that had not been heard in decades, a sound that struck fear into even the most seasoned delegates. Red lights flared to life, bathing the curved crystalline walls of the chamber in a pulsating, ominous glow. The air, once filled with the low murmur of diplomatic discussions, grew heavy with dread as the delegates turned their attention to the central platform. The speaker of the council, Lyra Tana, stood frozen for a moment, her tall, willowy frame casting a long shadow against the crimson light. Her usually calm and composed expression faltered as she hurriedly activated the central console. The main screen flickered, static hissing through the chamber like a serpent's warning. Then, through the distortion, a voice emerged, weak, desperate, and filled with raw fear. "This is Governor Elias from New Haven," the voice rasped, each word strained as if spoken between gasps for air. "We are under attack. Please, someone help us. They came out of nowhere. Our defenses are overwhelmed, our people." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed louder than the alarm itself. The delegates sat in stunned silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering red light. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The weight of the governor's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, suffocating and inescapable. Then, as if the transmission had shaken them from a trance, the chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates, their skin tones varying from the pale blues of waterworlders to the deep greens of forest dwellers, rose to their feet, shouting over one another in frantic debate. Others remained seated, their faces pale and stricken, unable to process the sudden intrusion of violence into their orderly world. The council chamber, a symbol of unity and peace, now felt like a battlefield of its own. Speaker Lyra raised her voice, sharp and commanding, cutting through the cacophony. "Silence," she demanded, her voice echoing off the crystalline walls. Slowly, the delegates quieted, though the tension in the air remained palpable. Lyra turned back to the console, her fingers trembling slightly as she replayed the transmission. This time, the delegates listened more intently, their expressions growing darker with each passing second. The mention of New Haven, a colony known across the galaxy for its lush fields and groundbreaking agricultural research, struck a chord with everyone in the room. It was a place of peace, a symbol of what the council stood for. And now it was burning. "They came out of nowhere," Governor Elias' voice repeated, hoarse and broken. "Our defenses are overwhelmed, our people." Again, the transmission dissolved into static, leaving the delegates with nothing but the haunting echo of his plea. Lyra's gaze swept across the room, taking in the faces of the assembled representatives. Councillor Rin, a stout figure from the industrial world of Farron, clenched his fists, his metallic skin glinting under the red light. "This is unacceptable," he bellowed. "How could this happen? New Haven is a peaceful colony, they have no enemies." Councillor Marine, a slender woman with emerald green skin from the forest planet Solaris, shook her head, her voice trembling. "They are farmers, scientists, not soldiers. They cannot defend themselves against an attack of this scale." "What do we know about the attackers?" asked Councillor Kale, his voice calm but laced with urgency. He was younger than most of the other delegates, his sharp features and piercing gaze betraying a mind that never stopped analyzing. Lyra pressed another button on the console, and a new image appeared on the screen. The room fell silent as they stared at the sight of dark, jagged ships moving through the void like predatory shadows. Their design was crude and menacing, built for destruction rather than exploration. The ships seemed to absorb the light around them, their black hulls glinting faintly with the reflections of distant stars. "These ships were detected 3 days ago," Lyra explained, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They appeared from the void between star systems, no identification signals, no response to communication attempts. They went straight to New Haven and began their attack." The image shifted to show the colony itself. What had once been a vibrant patchwork of green fields and shimmering silver cities was now a smoldering ruin. Fires raged across the landscape, sending thick plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. The once pristine rivers ran dark with ash, and the faint outlines of fleeing civilians could be seen amidst the chaos. Counselor Derek, a representative from the oceanic world of Thalassa, raised his webbed hand. Speaker Lara, what forces do we have nearby? Surely the Council's peacekeeping fleets can intervene. Lyra shook her head, her expression grim. Our nearest fleet is 4 sectors away, dealing with the mining disputes near the Outer Rim. Another is protecting trade routes from pirate activity, and the third is assisting with the refugee crisis at the Broken Worlds. It would take them 6 weeks to reach New Haven. On 6 weeks, a Counselor Marion echoed, her voice rising in disbelief. The colony will be gone by then. The chamber erupted into chaos once more, with delegates shouting over one another in panic and frustration. Some called for immediate action, demanding that the Council divert its fleets. Others argued for negotiation with the attackers, though no one knew who or what they were. A few, their voices cold and pragmatic, suggested abandoning the colony entirely to save resources. Amidst the noise, Kale stood and raised his voice. What about the humans? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, some filled with shock, others with disdain. Lyra's brow furrowed as she regarded him. The humans. She repeated, her tone skeptical. Yes, Kale said firmly. They have fast ships, trained soldiers, and experience with dangerous situations. They could reach New Haven in time. Counselor Wren snorted in derision. The humans are Deathworlders, he said, his tone dripping with contempt. They come from a planet that tries to kill everything that lives on it. They are too dangerous, too unpredictable. Dangerous to whom? Kale countered, his voice sharp. To raiders who attack peaceful farmers. That sounds like exactly what we need. The room erupted into argument once more, the delegates divided. Some saw the humans as the only viable option, while others viewed them as a last resort, too risky to involve. Lyra raised her hands for silence once again, her expression conflicted. Finally, she made her decision. Computer, she said, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility, connect me to the human consulate on Station 7. The chamber held its collective breath as the screen flickered again. After a moment, the face of a human appeared, an older man with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes. His expression was calm, almost unnervingly so given the situation. This is Envoy James Carter, he said, his voice deep and steady. How can I assist you? Lyra hesitated for a moment, then spoke. Envoy Carter, we have an emergency. The colony of New Haven is under attack. Our peacekeeping forces are too far away to respond. We need someone who can act immediately. Carter's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, determination perhaps. What kind of attackers? He asked simply. Unknown, Lyra replied. A fleet of heavily armed ships, no communication, no demands, civilian casualties are likely high. Carter nodded slowly. I'll contact our rapid response team. They can be ready to depart within 4 hours. The delegates exchanged stunned glances. Counselor Wren stood abruptly. Envoy Carter, we have not yet agreed to involve your forces. We are still discussing. With all due respect, Counselor, Carter interrupted, his voice calm but firm, while you discuss, people are dying. We don't need a contract or payment. We need coordinates and permission to help. The room fell silent once more, the delegates too shocked to respond. Lyra took a deep breath and nodded. You have both. Carter's image flickered off the screen, leaving the chamber in heavy silence. For the first time in hours, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope. But as the emergency alarm blared again, signaling another message from New Haven, she knew the battle was far from over. The council chamber, still bathed in the faint red glow of the emergency lights, felt suffocatingly tense. The image of the attacker's fleet remained frozen on the central screen, casting ominous shadows across the room. The ships were unlike anything the Council had seen before, dark, angular, and predatory, their jagged shapes designed to inspire fear. They moved in perfect formation, like a pack of wolves circling their prey, their black hulls absorbing the faint starlight. No markings, no insignias, no sign of allegiance. They were ghosts in the void, and their purpose was clear: destruction. Speaker Lyra Tana sat at the head of the chamber, her hands clasped tightly together. Her usually serene face was drawn with worry, her pale silver eyes betraying the storm of emotions she fought to suppress. She had always prided herself on her ability to remain calm under pressure, to guide the Council with wisdom and grace. But now, as the cries for help from New Haven echoed in her mind, she felt the weight of her position pressing down on her like never before. The chamber was in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices rising in panic and anger. "We must evacuate the colony immediately." Counselor Marion's voice cut through the noise, her emerald green skin glistening under the harsh red light. "If we act now, we can save at least some of the civilians." "Evacuate?" Counselor Rin's voice boomed, his metallic fists slamming against the table. "And leave our people to be slaughtered? No, we must hire mercenaries, the best we can find. They'll deal with these raiders." "Mercenaries?" Marion shot back, her voice trembling with outrage. "Do you think these killers can be stopped with hired guns? We don't even know who they are or what they want. Then we negotiate." Another delegate interjected, his voice desperate. "Send a message to the attackers. Offer them resources, money, whatever they want. Surely they'll listen to reason." "Reason?" Rin sneered, his metallic features twisting into a scowl. "Did they seem reasonable to you when they burned New Haven's fields and slaughtered its people?" The argument swirled around Lyra like a storm, each voice pulling her in a different direction. Her mind raced, but no solution seemed right. Evacuation would mean abandoning the colony to its fate. Hiring mercenaries was risky. They were as likely to turn on the Council as they were to fight the attackers. Negotiation was a gamble with unknown enemies who had already shown no interest in communication. Every option felt like a failure. As the delegates continued to argue, Lyra's thoughts drifted to the past. She remembered the early days of the Council, when she had first taken her place as speaker. Back then, the galaxy had been a different place. The Council's focus had been on unity, on building bridges between worlds that had once been at war. They had invested in trade, in diplomacy, in creating a network of peace that spanned the stars. Defense had always been an afterthought, a relic of a more violent age. She had been proud of those decisions, proud to lead a council that valued dialogue over conflict. But now, as she stared at the image of New Haven burning, she couldn't help but wonder if they had been naive. Had their focus on peace left them vulnerable? Had she failed the very people she had sworn to protect? Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice, calm, measured, and firm. "We're wasting time," said Counselor Kale, rising from his seat. His sharp features and piercing blue eyes commanded attention, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Kale was one of the youngest members of the Council, but his presence was undeniable. He was a scholar, a historian who had spent years studying the rise and fall of civilizations. His knowledge of humanity in particular was unmatched, an interest that had earned him both respect and suspicion among his peers. "What do you propose, Kale?" Lyra asked, her voice steady but weary. Kale met her gaze, his expression resolute. "We contact the humans." The chamber erupted once more, but this time the uproar was directed entirely at Kale. "The humans?" Rin scoffed, his metallic features twisting in disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? They're savages, Deathworlders. They come from a planet so hostile that it's a miracle they even survived, let alone made it to the stars. They're unpredictable," Marion added, her voice laced with unease. "They don't follow our rules, they act on instinct, on emotion. They're dangerous." Kale raised his hands, silencing the room once more. Yes, they are dangerous, he said, his voice calm but firm, but that is exactly why we need them. They are survivors. They have faced extinction more times than we can count, and they have always found a way to endure, to fight back. If anyone can stand against these raiders, it's them. Lyra studied Kale carefully, her silver eyes narrowing. You've studied humanity more than anyone here, Kale. Do you truly believe they are our best hope? Kale nodded, his expression unwavering. I do. I've read their history, their stories. I've seen what they're capable of. They are not like us. They don't wait for permission or debate endlessly while people die. They act, they adapt. And right now, that's what we need. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed his words. Some looked thoughtful, others skeptical. Rin crossed his arms, his metallic skin glinting under the light. Even if we wanted to contact them, why would they help us? What do we have to offer them? Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. Humans don't always need a reason to help. Sometimes they do it simply because it's the right thing to do. Lyra leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the council's eyes on her, waiting for her decision. Contacting the humans was a risk, a gamble that could either save New Haven or plunge the galaxy into even greater chaos. But as she thought of Governor Elia's desperate plea, of the lives hanging in the balance, she knew there was no other choice. Very well, she said, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of her decision. We will contact the human consulate. Let's hope Kale is right. The chamber remained silent, the tension thick enough to cut. For the first time in years, the council had chosen a path that was uncertain, unpredictable. But as Lyra looked at the image of New Haven burning, she realized that uncertainty was better than inaction. Somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity would soon hear the call, and the galaxy would never be the same. The chamber was cloaked in an uneasy silence as the council prepared to send the message. Speaker Lyra's fingers hovered over the console, her silver eyes fixed on the darkened screen before her. The decision to contact humanity had been made, but the weight of that choice pressed heavily on her chest. Around her, the delegates sat in tense anticipation, their faces etched with uncertainty. Even Kale, who had argued so passionately for this course of action, seemed subdued, his sharp features shadowed by the dim red light. Finally, Lyra pressed the button, her voice steady but low. Computer, establish a connection with the human consulate on Station 7. The screen flickered to life, and after a moment of static, a face appeared. Envoy James Carter. He was older than most of the council had expected. His silver-streaked hair and weathered features spoke of a life lived with both hardship and purpose. His dark eyes were sharp, intelligent, and calm, yet there was something behind them, a quiet intensity like the stillness before a storm. He wore no elaborate robes or symbols of rank, just a simple dark uniform with a small insignia over his heart. Earth's blue and green sphere encircled by a ring of stars. This is Envoy Carter, he said, his voice deep and steady, carrying a weight that immediately commanded attention. How can I assist the council? For a moment, no one spoke. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances, as if they were unsure how to address him. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice formal but tinged with urgency. Envoy Carter, we are reaching out to request your assistance. The colony of New Haven is under attack by an unknown fleet. Our peacekeeping forces are too far away to respond in time. We need your help. Carter's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark of understanding, of recognition. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. Tell me everything, he said simply. Lyra nodded and relayed the details. The sudden appearance of the attackers, the destruction of New Haven's fields and cities, the desperate plea from Governor Elias. As she spoke, Carter listened intently, his gaze never wavering. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. He simply absorbed every word, his expression unreadable. When Lyra finished, the chamber fell silent once more. The delegates watched Carter anxiously, waiting for his response. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes scanning the room. "We'll help," he said. The simplicity of his answer stunned the council. For a moment, no one spoke, as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. Lyra blinked, her composure faltering. You will?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Carter nodded. "Yes. We'll send a rapid response team immediately. They can be ready to leave within 4 hours." The room erupted into murmurs of shock and confusion. Counselor Rin leaned forward, his metallic features glinting in the dim light. "And what exactly do you want in return?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "Payment, resources, a trade agreement." Carter's gaze shifted to Rin, calm and unflinching. "Nothing," he said simply. The murmurs grew louder, the delegates exchanging incredulous glances. Even Lyra seemed taken aback. "Nothing," she repeated. "You're willing to risk your people, your resources, for nothing." Carter's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Your people are in danger, that's reason enough." The council fell silent once more, the weight of his words settling over them like a heavy blanket. Lyra studied Carter carefully, searching his face for any hint of deception, but there was none. His expression was steady, his gaze unwavering. He meant what he said. "Why?" And Kale's voice broke the silence, his tone filled with genuine curiosity. "Why would you do this? What drives you to act so selflessly?" Carter turned his gaze to Kale, and for a moment he seemed to hesitate. Then slowly he leaned forward, his hands resting on the desk before him. "Because we've been there," he said, his voice low but filled with an unmistakable weight. "We've faced extinction. We've watched our cities burn, our people suffer. We know what it's like to feel helpless, to cry out for aid and hear only silence in return. We survived because we fought for each other, because we refused to let despair win. And if we can spare anyone else that pain, if we can give them hope, then we will, no matter the cost." As he spoke, the room seemed to grow quieter, the weight of his words settling over the delegates like a shroud. Kale's gaze softened, his respect for humanity deepening. Even Rin, who had been so quick to distrust, seemed to falter, his metallic features reflecting a flicker of doubt. Carter leaned back again, his expression calm but resolute. "We'll arrive in 18 hours, he said. "I suggest you prepare your people for evacuation and coordinate with our team when they land. We'll do everything we can to protect New Haven." Lyra nodded, her voice steady once more. "Thank you, Envoy Carter. On behalf of the Council and the people of New Haven, thank you." Carter inclined his head slightly. "We'll see you soon." With that, the screen went dark, leaving the chamber in silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The delegates sat in stunned silence, their minds racing to process what had just happened. Finally, Kale broke the silence, his voice quiet but firm. "They'll come," he said, his gaze fixed on the darkened screen. "They always do." Lyra nodded, her silver eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. 18 hours, she murmured. 18 hours until we find out if we made the right choice." Outside the chamber, the stars stretched endlessly across the void, cold and unfeeling. Somewhere in that vast expanse, humanity was preparing to answer the call. And as the council waited, their hearts heavy with anticipation, one question lingered in the air. Would it be enough? The Asterisk Vanguard cut through the vast darkness of space like a spear, its engines humming with quiet purpose. Inside, the crew moved with precision, their actions synchronized by years of experience and trust. Every corridor, every workstation buzzed with energy, not the frantic kind born of chaos, but the steady, determined rhythm of people who knew exactly what was at stake. Commander Alex Rivera stood on the bridge, his tall frame silhouetted against the stars. His dark eyes scanned the holographic display in front of him, where the colony of New Haven flickered faintly, a fragile light surrounded by the encroaching shadows of destruction. His jaw tightened as he considered the reports, civilians trapped, fires raging, and somewhere out there in the void, an enemy fleet waiting to strike again. Rivera was not a man who let fear dictate his actions. He had seen too much, survived too much to let it take hold. But as he stood there, hands clasped behind his back, he couldn't shake the weight pressing on his chest. They were racing against time, and the lives of thousands hung in the balance. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in focused silence. Strategist Nina Blake sat at her station, her sharp green eyes flicking across tactical readouts. She was a small woman, lean and wiry, with a mind that moved faster than most could follow. Nina was the kind of person who could see patterns where others saw chaos, who could predict an enemy's next move before they even knew it themselves. Her voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. "Commander, the Raiders' formation suggests a blockade strategy. They're not just here to destroy, they're here to take control. They'll target key infrastructure first, then move to secure the colony's resources." Rivera turned to her, his expression grim, and their interest in New Haven's agricultural technology. Nina hesitated, her fingers tapping lightly against the console. "It's advanced, far beyond what most colonies have, self-sustaining, capable of producing food in even the harshest environments. If the Raiders take it, they could use it to supply their forces indefinitely. Or worse, sell it to the highest bidder." Rivera nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we can't let them have it." At the back of the bridge, Marco Perez leaned against the wall, his arms crossed over his grease-streaked jumpsuit. The chief engineer was a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual smirk and a knack for finding solutions where none seemed possible. His dark curls were perpetually messy, and his hands bore the scars of countless repairs and modifications. "Don't worry, Commander," Marco said, his voice laced with confidence. "If those bastards try to mess with New Haven's systems, they'll find themselves in for a nasty surprise. I've been working on a few tricks, might not be pretty, but it'll get the job done." Rivera allowed himself a small smile. "I'll hold you to that, Marco." In the medbay, Dr. Emily Chen was preparing for the worst. She moved with practiced efficiency, her delicate hands sorting through medical supplies and double-checking equipment. Emily was the heart of the Vanguard Asterisk, her empathy and compassion a steady anchor for the crew in their darkest moments. Her almond-shaped eyes, warm and kind, carried a quiet strength that had seen them through more crises than she could count. As she packed another kit, Emily glanced at the young medic assisting her. "Remember, the colonists will be scared, confused, some might even resist evacuation. They won't want to leave their homes behind. We'll need to be patient to earn their trust." The medic nodded, but Emily could see the tension in his shoulders. She placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We've done this before, and we'll do it again. Just focus on what you can control." In the mess hall, the rest of the crew gathered for a final briefing. The atmosphere was tense but not hopeless. They were soldiers, engineers, medics, and scientists, each one chosen for their skill and resilience. And though they came from different walks of life, they shared a bond forged in the crucible of countless missions. They joked, they argued, they supported one another. They were more than a crew, they were family. As Rivera entered the room, the chatter quieted. He stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding but not overbearing. He didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His crew respected him too much for that. "We're 18 hours out from New Haven," he began, his tone measured but firm. "You've all seen the reports. The colony is under attack by an unknown fleet. Civilians are trapped and the raiders are after their agricultural technology. Our mission is simple: protect the colony, evacuate the civilians, and neutralize the threat." He paused, his dark eyes sweeping the room. "This won't be easy. The raiders outnumber us and we don't know their full capabilities. But we've faced worse odds before. We're the Vanguard Asterisk. We adapt, we overcome, and we don't leave anyone behind." The crew nodded, their expressions resolute. Marco leaned back in his chair, his smirk returning. Guess I'd better make sure the ship doesn't fall apart, huh? Emily shot him a look, her lips twitching into a small smile. Please do, I'd rather not have to patch you up again. Nina tapped her fingers against the table, her mind already working through a dozen scenarios. I'll have a full tactical plan ready by the time we arrive. We'll hit them where it hurts. Rivera nodded, his chest swelling with pride. Good. Get to it, dismissed. As the crew dispersed, Rivera lingered in the mess hall, his gaze fixed on the stars outside the window. He thought of the colonists on New Haven, families huddled together, children crying, people praying for a miracle. And he thought of the raiders, their dark ships circling like vultures ready to descend. A crackle of static interrupted his thoughts. Commander, Nina's voice came through the comms, tense but controlled. We've intercepted a weak signal from New Haven. It's a distress call, but there's something else. A fragment of a message. Rivera straightened, his heart pounding. Play it. The signal was faint, distorted, but the words were unmistakable. They're taking everything. The fields, the systems, they want control. Please, anyone help us. The transmission cut off, leaving only silence. Rivera clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. Inform the crew. We're moving into high alert. Whatever these raiders want, they're not going to get it. As the Asterisk Vanguard surged forward, its engines burning bright against the endless void, the crew prepared for the battle ahead. Each of them carried their own fears, their own doubts, but they also carried something far stronger. Hope. Hope for the people of New Haven. Hope that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, humanity could still shine a light. And as the stars blurred into streaks of light around them, the Asterisk Vanguard raced toward its destiny, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The Vanguard tore through the void of space, its sleek hull glowing with the heat of re-entry. The ship plunged directly into New Haven's atmosphere, a blazing streak of light cutting across the choking gray sky. Below, the colony stretched out like a broken dream, a patchwork of scorched fields, crumbled buildings, and rising plumes of black smoke. Fires burned unchecked in the distance, casting an eerie orange glow over the once thriving settlement. The air itself seemed heavy, thick with ash and despair. Commander Rivera stood at the helm, his voice sharp and commanding as he relayed orders. Prepare for deployment. We hit the ground running, no hesitation, no mistakes. Lives depend on us. The Asterisk Vanguard shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere, its engines roaring defiantly. The raiders' ships, dark and angular, hovered ominously over the colony, their weapons trained on key structures. But the sudden arrival of the human vessel caught them off guard. For a brief moment, there was chaos among their ranks, confused maneuvers, panicked transmissions. And that moment was all the Asterisk Vanguard needed. The landing was swift and precise. The ship's ramp descended with a hiss, and the crew poured out like a tide of resolve. Each team moved with purpose, their roles clear, their hearts steeled for the task ahead. The landscape of despair. New Haven was a ghost of its former self. The colony had once been a beacon of hope, its advanced agricultural systems transforming barren soil into lush fields of green. But now those fields were nothing more than blackened husks, the rich earth churned into mud by the weight of enemy machines. The air reeked of burnt crops and scorched metal. Buildings that had once stood as symbols of progress and unity were reduced to rubble, their skeletal remains jutting out like broken bones. As the human teams spread out, they passed frightened civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, families clutching one another, their faces streaked with soot and tears. A child no older than 6 peeked out from behind her mother's tattered cloak, her wide eyes filled with fear. When she saw the soldiers, her grip tightened on her mother's hand. But then something shifted. One of the soldiers, a young woman with a kind smile, knelt down and extended a hand to the girl. "We're here to help," she said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a balm. The girl hesitated, her small frame trembling, but then she took the soldier's hand. Around them, other civilians began to stir, their fear giving way to cautious hope as the humans moved among them, offering aid and reassurance. Emily's mission: saving lives. In the heart of the chaos, Dr. Emily Chen worked tirelessly. She had set up a makeshift triage center in the ruins of what had once been a community hall. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the acrid stench of smoke and blood. Civilians lay on stretchers and blankets, their wounds raw and untreated. Emily moved from one patient to the next, her hands steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Hold still," she murmured to an elderly man whose leg was badly burned. Her voice was calm, soothing as she applied a salve to his wound. "This will help with the pain." The man winced but nodded, his weathered face softening with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. We thought no one would come." Emily looked into his eyes, her own filled with determination. "You're not alone anymore. We'll get you through this." Nearby, a young boy cried out in pain as a medic tried to set his broken arm. Emily crossed the room in an instant, kneeling beside him. Hey, she said gently, brushing his sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. "Look at me." "What's your name?" "J. Jonas," the boy stammered, his voice trembling. "Well, Jonas," Emily said with a small smile, "you're one of the bravest kids I've ever met. I need you to be brave for just a little longer, okay? I'll be right here." The boy nodded, his tears slowing as Emily held his hand. Her presence was a beacon of calm amidst the storm, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there was still kindness. Marco's unconventional tactics. On the outskirts of the colony, Marco Perez and his engineering team were deep in enemy territory. Their mission: sabotage. The raiders had set up a command post near the colony's power station, and Marco had a plan to take it down. It wasn't exactly by the book asterisk, but then Marco had never been one for rules. "All right, listen up," he said, crouching behind a pile of rubble. "We're gonna overload their systems. They're using the colony's grid to power their operations, so we're gonna give them a little surprise." His team exchanged nervous glances, but they trusted him. Marco pulled a small device from his pack, a makeshift EMP generator he'd cobbled together during the descent. It looked like a bundle of wires and scrap metal, but Marco grinned like it was a masterpiece. "Once this baby goes off, their comms and defenses are toast," he explained. "Then we move in and clean up. Easy, right?" One of his teammates raised an eyebrow. "Easy? You mean if it doesn't blow us?" "Nina's precision strike asterisk." Meanwhile, Nina Blake led a tactical assault on one of the raiders' strongholds. Her team moved like shadows, their movements precise and coordinated. Nina had studied the enemy's patterns, memorized their weaknesses, and now she put that knowledge to use. "Take out the sentries first," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the comms. "Quietly, we don't want them raising the alarm." Her team nodded, slipping into position. One by one, the sentries fell, their bodies crumpling silently to the ground. Nina's sharp eyes scanned the area, her mind calculating the next move. "There," she said, pointing to a weak point in the structure. "Plant charges along the support beams. Will bring the whole thing down." As her team worked, Nina kept watch, her pulse steady despite the danger. When the charges were set, she gave the signal, and they retreated to a safe distance. Moments later, the ground shook as the stronghold collapsed in a cloud of dust and fire. The turning tide. The battle raged on, but the tide was turning. The raiders, once so confident in their dominance, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The humans fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that left their enemies reeling. And as the sun began to rise over the smoldering colony, its golden light cutting through the smoke, hope began to bloom. The civilians, once paralyzed by fear, now looked to the sky with renewed faith. The vanguard had come, and with it, the promise of survival. But the fight was far from over, and the crew knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The community center loomed in the center of the ruined colony, its once welcoming facade now marred by bullet holes and scorch marks. Smoke curled from shattered windows, and the faint cries of the hostages inside carried on the wind, a haunting reminder of the stakes. The raiders had fortified the building, their dark silhouettes visible through the gaps in the barricades. Armed and desperate, they watched the streets with a predator's vigilance, their weapons trained on any movement. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Over 500 civilians were crammed into the main hall, their faces pale and streaked with dirt. Mothers clutched their children, whispering reassurances they didn't truly believe. Elderly men and women sat slumped against the walls, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. The air was heavy, thick with fear and the acrid stench of sweat and smoke. Every sound, a cough, a muffled sob, drew sharp glares from the raiders, who paced the room with tense, restless energy. At the center of it all stood their leader, a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face. His voice was low and cold as he barked orders to his subordinates. No one gets in, no one gets out. If they try anything, he let the threat hang in the air, his gaze sweeping over the hostages. The meaning was clear, Alex's plan. Outside, Commander Alex Rivera studied the building from a concealed position, his mind racing. The situation was a nightmare, one wrong move and hundreds of innocent lives would be lost. But Alex wasn't the kind of man to let fear paralyze him. He turned to his team, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "They're using the hostages as shields," he said, his dark eyes narrowing. "We can't risk a direct assault, but if we can expose their positions, make them vulnerable, we can take them out without endangering the civilians." Nina Blake frowned, her sharp mind already working through the possibilities. "Expose their positions how? They've fortified the building. We can't see inside." Alex's lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that always appeared when he was on the verge of something daring. "Not directly, but we don't need to see them. We just need to hear them." The team exchanged puzzled looks, but Alex continued, his confidence unwavering. "The building's structure is old, reinforced with metallic alloys that resonate at specific frequencies. If we use harmonic vibrations, we can create a sound wave strong enough to disrupt their cover. It'll force them to move, expose themselves. That's when we strike." Marco Perez let out a low whistle, his brows raised. "You're talking about turning the whole building into a giant tuning fork. That's bold." Alex met his gaze, his expression firm. "It's our best shot, can you do it?" Marco grinned, his confidence returning. "Oh, I can do it. Just give me 10 minutes and some cover." The civilians' bravery. Inside the community center, the tension was unbearable. The hostages sat in silence, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding. The raiders' leader paced back and forth, his eyes flicking toward the windows. He could feel the noose tightening, the humans outside closing in, but he didn't know how or when they would strike. That uncertainty gnawed at him, fraying his nerves. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. It started as a faint vibration, barely noticeable, but quickly grew louder. The walls seemed to shiver, the floor trembling beneath their feet. The hostages exchanged frightened glances, their whispers rising in a crescendo of panic. "What's happening?" A woman murmured, clutching her daughter tightly. The raiders froze, their weapons raised, their eyes darting around the room. The leader barked orders, his voice sharp with panic. "Stay alert, it's a trick." But the vibrations only intensified. A deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The walls groaned under the strain, cracks spiderwebbing across the plaster. The raiders began to shift uneasily, their confidence faltering. In the chaos, one of the hostages, a young man with a bandaged arm, stood up. His voice was shaky but determined as he addressed the others. "They're trying to help us," he said, his words cutting through the noise. "The soldiers, they're doing this to save us. We have to stay calm, trust them." His words spread like wildfire, igniting a spark of courage among the captives. Mothers hushed their children, whispering reassurances. The elderly straightened their spines, their fear giving way to quiet resolve. They held on to each other, a silent pact forming among them. They would not give the raiders the satisfaction of breaking them. The climactic moment. Outside, Marco's device reached its peak. The harmonic vibrations surged through the building, forcing the raiders to abandon their positions. They stumbled out of cover, their movements erratic as they tried to regain control of the situation. Now. Alex shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The human soldiers moved with precision, their training and discipline turning the tide of the battle. Nina led a strike team through the front entrance, her sharp eyes tracking every target. Each shot was calculated, each move deliberate. The raiders fell one by one, their disarray leaving them vulnerable. Meanwhile, Alex and a second team breached the side entrance, moving swiftly to secure the hostages. The civilians gasped as the soldiers burst into the room, their fear melting into relief. Alex's voice rang out calm and authoritative. "Stay low, follow my team, we'll get you out of here." The hostages moved as one, their trust in the soldiers overriding their terror. They clung to each other as they were led to safety, their steps quick but steady. Behind them, the battle raged on, the humans pushing the raiders back with relentless determination. In the end, it was over almost as quickly as it had begun. The last raider fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. The community center was secure, the hostages safe. Outside, the civilians gathered in the open air, their faces turned toward the rising sun. Tears streamed down their cheeks, but they were tears of relief, of gratitude. The aftermath. As the colony began to stir with life once more, the scars of the battle remained. The buildings were still broken, the fields still burned. But the people, they were unbroken. They stood together, united by their shared ordeal, their hope rekindled by the bravery of the Vanguard *. Alex stood at the edge of the crowd, his gaze distant as he surveyed the damage. Emily approached him, her face weary but kind. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them." Alex nodded, but his expression was somber. "We saved them," he corrected, "but there's still so much to rebuild." Emily placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "They'll rebuild," she said with quiet certainty, "because you gave them the chance." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the lingering smoke, the colony began to heal. The people of New Haven had survived the darkness, and though the scars would remain, so too would the strength they had found in each other. The days after the battle were a blur of activity and transformation. New Haven, once a shattered colony drowning in smoke and despair, began to stir with life again. The humans worked side by side with the colonists, their hands blistered and their bodies weary, but their spirits unyielding. Where there had been rubble, now there were walls rising again. Where there had been silence, now there were voices, laughing, crying, calling out to one another in hope. The people of New Haven watched the humans with awe. At first they had feared them, these strange, determined beings who had descended from the sky like avenging spirits. But now they saw something else. They saw kindness in the way Emily Chen knelt beside an injured farmer, her hands steady as she wrapped his wounds. They saw resilience in Marco Perez, who worked tirelessly to repair the colony's power grid, his jokes lightening even the heaviest moments. They saw courage in Nina Blake, who stood watch at the colony's edge, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any lingering threats. For the colonists, the humans were not just saviors, they were a revelation. The transformation of New Haven *. The colony itself began to change, its scars fading as new structures took shape. The fields, once blackened and barren, were replanted with crops that would soon flourish under the humans' advanced agricultural techniques. The community center, where so much pain had unfolded, was rebuilt into a place of gathering and celebration. Its walls, now painted in bright, hopeful colors, stood as a testament to resilience. One afternoon, as Alex Rivera walked through the colony, a small voice called out to him. Turning, he saw a young girl running toward him, her tiny hands clutching something carefully wrapped in cloth. She stopped in front of him, her wide eyes shining with gratitude. "This is for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex knelt down, his expression softening. "For me." The girl nodded, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a small carved figure. It was crude but unmistakable, a tiny replica of Alex himself, his stance proud, his weapon slung over his shoulder. "I made it," the girl said shyly, "to thank you for saving us." Alex took the figure with reverence, his throat tightening. He looked into the girl's eyes, seeing not just gratitude but something deeper, hope, trust, and the belief that humanity could be more than what it had been. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep it with me, always." Around them, other civilians approached, offering small tokens of thanks, flowers, handmade trinkets, even simple words of gratitude. The humans accepted them humbly, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had done and what they had yet to do. A philosophical reflection. That evening, Alex stood on a hill overlooking the colony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Emily joined him, her presence quiet but grounding. "They admire you, you know," she said, her voice gentle. Alex shook his head. "They admire what we represent. Not just me, all of us." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "And what do we represent, Alex?" He was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "Adaptation, resilience. Humanity has always been about surviving the impossible, about finding light in the darkest places. But it's more than that. We protect, we inspire, we give others a reason to believe that no matter how bad things get, there's always a way forward." Emily nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "And now the galaxy sees that too." Behind them, the council representatives approached, their robes flowing in the evening breeze. They carried a formal contract, a declaration that humanity would become the galaxy's protectors, a role they had earned not through conquest but through compassion. Alex accepted it with quiet resolve, knowing the weight of what it meant. The colony was alive with activity as the Asterisk Vanguard prepared to depart. The humans had done all they could to fortify New Haven, leaving behind advanced technology, defense systems, and the knowledge to use them. But more than that, they left behind hope, a belief that the colony could stand strong on its own. As the crew boarded the ship, the colonists gathered to see them off. Children waved, their faces bright with smiles. Adults clasped their hands over their hearts, a gesture of respect and gratitude. Alex stood at the ramp, his gaze sweeping over the crowd one last time. "You'll be all right," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "You're stronger than you know." The colonists nodded, their faces resolute. They believed him, humanity's legacy. As the Asterisk Vanguard rose into the sky, the colony grew smaller and smaller, until it was just a speck on the horizon. But its impact lingered, a reminder of what humanity could achieve when it chose to fight not for power, but for others. The ship's crew gathered in the common room, their faces weary but proud. Marco leaned back in his chair, a grin on his face. "Another colony saved. We're getting pretty good at this." Nina smirked. "Don't get cocky. There's still a galaxy out there that needs us." Emily glanced at Alex, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Alex held up the small carved figure the girl had given him, his